After I died and came back, I knew I was done chasing after Mason, my so-called childhood sweetheart. He threw a party with a no girls or dogs allowed sign right on the front lawn. Seriously, I hightailed it to Hawaii, as far away from his entitled but as I could get. He bitched that my perfume made his house smell gross, so I packed my stuff and moved out without a peep. Then he whined that he couldn't stand breathing the same air as me after graduation, so I split faster than a greased piglet and never looked back. Finally, he had the nerve to say that my very existence was confusing his soulmate. I just nodded. It wasn't long before I found someone new and blasted it all over Instagram. I made every single opposite choice I made last time over and over, because last time, I actually married Mason, and his precious soulmate took a swan dive off a cliff. He blamed me, called me a murderer, tortured me, and basically made my life a living hell before I ended up shark bait. This time around, I just wanted to, live. Then I started dating someone new. Mason blocked my path, eyes bloodshot and crazy. Sarah, come with me right now, and I'll forgive your little joke. No girls or dogs allowed. Seeing that totally familiar sign on the lawn made me want to do a happy dance. Sarah, that's me. And I was being equated to a dog, but nobody knew how relieved I was in that moment, because I'd been reborn. I was back at my fiancé Mason's birthday party. In everyone's eyes, I wasn't good enough for Mason. My family wasn't rich and honestly looks-wise I was not in his league. He was the golden boy of the Mason family in our town, and I was just an orphan with no one. It only took one stupid childhood game to tie us together for over 20 years. Everyone felt bad for Mason. He did too. That's why he put up that sign stopping me all dolled up right at the door. Sarah, it's not that we don't want you to come in, it's just, Mason's orders. Just be cool, okay? Don't make this awkward for us or for yourself. Mason's brothers were standing guard, relaying the message with stone-cold faces, and flanking them were security guys with tasers. Seriously, that's the reception committee they put together, just for me. Everyone knew Mason couldn't stand me. Last time, I didn't get into the party either. I waited by the door like some stray, from sunup to sundown. I ended up with a nasty fever and passed out. Mason's parents found out and gave him a lecture, then pushed our engagement along faster. On our wedding day, Mason's soulmate went cliff diving. In Mason's eyes and in those of his clique, I was the murderer. Mason swore revenge. He gave me the cold shoulder, abused me, crushed me and tortured me. I asked for a divorce like a million times, but he always said no. Mason would snarl that he'd drag me down with him. The feeling of being ignored, shut out, treated like a piece of furniture. I lived that for 20 long years. Finally, I went nuts and jumped into the ocean, ending up as fish food. And the messed up thing? As I was dying, I saw Jessica strut back into town and run right into Mason's arms. She wasn't dead, she was living the high life, some famous designer. She and Mason got their overdue star-crossed lovers ending and everyone cheered them on. The whole time I was just the chump. Not this time. This time I was going to live it up. And step 1, get the hell away from Mason. I turned around and left, in front of so many stunned stares, not giving it a second thought. Back at the Mason house, I ripped off the uncomfortable dress. Everyone knew that I was Mason's lapdog. Whenever it came to something about Mason, I always was thinking 10 steps ahead, and I made sure he had everything. Mason had mentioned more than once that work was exhausting, and that he needed to just chill. So, I organized a whole Hawaii trip to go with his schedule, because he had said once that he missed the sand and the ocean over there. But last time, Mason didn't go to Hawaii. Instead, he went hiking and camping with Jessica. I was ordered to come along. In the middle of a storm, Mason told me to pick up Jessica's bracelet. I ended up tumbling down the cliff, breaking my leg, and I spent 2 whole months in the hospital. I never wanted to go through the helplessness I felt at that moment ever again. Getting away from Mason was step 1. I packed up my stuff, grabbed my ID and went downstairs. Just then, Mason came in all dressed up. He looked at me, scoffed, and threw my suitcase away. I frowned and asked, "What are you doing?" "Sarah, I should be asking you that question. How old are you? What is this, a runaway act? What are you going to do next time? Write a suicide note?" Mason was panting, disgusted with me. "Sarah, are you serious? You're trying to threaten me again with suicide." I patted the dirt off my suitcase and said clearly, "Who said I was going to commit suicide? He and Jessica, a pair of backstabbers, were going to live it up. I just came back to life. Why would I kill myself?" Mason laughed, not answering. Jessica spoke softly right behind him. "Sarah, if you wanted to come to his party, you could have just asked. You two grew up together. He wouldn't have stopped you. Suicide only works once. After that, it's like crying wolf." Jessica was saying a lot with a few words. Mason looked at me with even more disgust. Memories ran through my head. I remembered something. After Mason and Jessica got together, he was a different person. I was angry, saying that I would jump into a river somewhere. Mason's parents got scared and ordered him to break up with Jessica. After that, Mason was disgusted with me, ignored me, and refused to talk to me. Jessica's friend group shut me out, bullied me, and he didn't care. I looked right at Mason and said, "You're overthinking it. I wasn't going to kill myself. I was packing to go to Hawaii." Mason laughed at me for trying to find a way to make myself look better. Jessica tugged on his sleeve. "Mason, why don't we let Sarah join us? She looks so sad." Mason looked troubled and was about to say something. I rejected again. "No thanks, I'm going to Hawaii." Mason scoffed. "Did you hear that? She's going to Hawaii. Sarah, don't be unreasonable right now." Jessica sighed and held my arm. Her sharp nails dug into my skin. I winced in pain and pushed her away. Jessica fell on the ground, holding her hand and looking at me like she couldn't believe what happened. "Sarah, you..." "Sarah, you're dead." Mason was angry and pushed me. I hit my head on the stairs and everything went black. I heard him yelling, "Sarah, are you addicted to bullying people? Ever since you came into this house, the air has been disgusting. You make me sick." I held back the pain and said, "I'll move out, don't worry. You better be serious." Mason's anger closed his throat. He glared at me and picked up Jessica, leaving me alone. I felt the blood coming from my head, And I remembered something. My relationship with Mason wasn't always this bad. Since I knew that he and I were going to be married, and that we were going to be family, I always tried to stick to him. He was rebellious, secretly playing games at shady internet cafes, so I went with him. Then he got into it with another guy over a game. I tried to break up the fight and accidentally cut my finger. Mason went savage. He beat up the other guy who was a lot bigger than him. But now, the guy who used to freak out if I cut my finger was hurting me for someone else, calling me evil. Whatever. When Mason's parents got home, my engagement with him would be gone. I looked at the servants and tried to smile. Can you take me to the hospital? I can pay you. A new servant looked like she wanted to help, but an older lady pulled her away. They spoke quietly, but I still heard. Are you crazy? Don't you know that Mason hates Miss Sarah? If he sees you, you'll get fired. The servant was scared and ran away after looking at me. I laughed and picked up my cracked phone. Mason's parents are always away. They're only home for 3 or 4 days a month. Mason was the master of the house. He said that many times. I'm not a Mason. I need to deal with my own problems. So no one would come near me. Whenever I got home, the leftovers would be thrown out. The dishes were all empty. I was used to it. I went to the hospital. The doctor said that I had a concussion. He told me to stay for a few days. When I got out, I went back to the Mason house to pick up my stuff. The servants watched me, but did nothing to help. That afternoon, I packed up everything and went to a hastily rented apartment. It was only temporary. In a few months, I would get my diploma, get a job offer, and end the engagement. I could get away from everything. On the 3rd day after I left the Mason house, Mason called me drunk. Where are you? Come over to A12. I was writing my resume, so I was annoyed. Mason, what's up? He stopped talking. Even the noise around him died down. I said hello, but he didn't say anything, so I was about to hang up. Then Mason spoke. Sarah, where are you? I kept typing and put the phone down, answering. Didn't you say that it made you sick to live in the same house as me? So I moved out. Don't worry, I won't come back. He breathed heavier, then laughed. Sarah, why are you so obedient? Weren't you the one who used to chase after me? If you're so obedient, I'm going to tell you to get out of town. Get out of my sight. Got it. Sarah, I don't know what you're doing, but if you keep messing with Jessica, you're going to regret it. My mouse was acting up and I looked at the screen. A few moments later, I realized what Mason had said. Mason scoffed. What's wrong? Can't say anything. Aren't you bored of your little games? Apologize to Jessica, and I'll let you come back. I said quietly. Okay, I promise you, Mason, I'll leave. Then I hung up. I got my diploma. I got some replies to the resumes I had sent. My favorite offer was from a company in the next city. I set up an interview right away. Having a job was my biggest wish last time. I was nervous, but the company called me before I got on the train. I was in. I was so happy I started looking for places to live. The idea of getting away from Mason made me so excited. I got a call from Mason right when I got off the train. He said angrily, Sarah, where are you? My good mood was ruined. What's up? Mason was even angrier. My parents are back. They want you to come home for dinner. It was evening when I got back to the Mason house. Everyone was at the table. Mason's parents, Mason and Jessica. None of them looked happy. Something must have happened when I was gone. I walked in. Mason looked at me and then got up and left. I'm done. I'm full. Jessica went after him. I sat next to his parents. They were awkward. I looked at them like my parents. They tried to save me when Mason locked me up last time, but Mason was in charge. They couldn't help. I didn't blame them. I blamed myself. I said softly, Mr. and Mrs. Mason, I've been thinking about this. Mason and I don't fit. He doesn't like me, and I don't like him. It's better if we can be free. The engagement should be over. Mrs. Mason looked stiff and tears started to well up. Are you serious? I nodded. I solved the problem I had wanted to fix the most. I felt happy. Before I left, I went back to the bedroom for something I had forgotten. Jessica stopped me. Sarah, can you give Mason back to me? I'm pregnant with his kid. He needs a father. She looked sad. I frowned and backed up. Jessica smiled and pushed my hands onto herself. Sarah, don't push me. The baby. My baby. It hurts. Jessica fell down the stairs and blood poured out. Mason ran out of the study. He slapped me. Sarah, you're evil. They said you were mean, but I didn't believe them. But now I do. What do you have to say? If it wasn't for you, Jessica and I wouldn't have broken up. Why are you messing with us? Mason's parents came out of the bedroom. Jessica held her stomach and cried. Mason asked, Mom, Dad, look, this is the woman you chose for me. I was lightheaded. I slapped him back. Don't worry, I'm not anymore.